Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. And the paradigm I want to share today is We Have Never Been Woke. It's a book by Musa Garvey, and it is the first book that I think takes a real critical analysis at white progressives. And as you probably know, that is one of my playlists. I hope in time to write a book on white progressives because the value of this book is that it's in an area that there's almost nothing else in there. And it is the first word in a book form on the topic of white progressives. So I'm probably going to do a lot of book reviews. That's not my jam. But this book's important, and I want to do a fair rendition of the book and let you know about it. Obviously, I have my books that you can find through Amazon or through my website, and that's fine. I love you to buy my books, but this is a book I want you to consider as well. So, what's Musa arguing about in this book? This book argues that white progressives, they have a position known as symbolic capitalists. Now, the way Musa defines it is like this. A symbolic capitalist is a professional who derives their wealth and status from the production, manipulation, and control of symbols, ideas, and information, rather than from physical goods or services. They operate in fields like media, academia, finance, consulting, management, and their work revolves around shaping narratives, managing perspectives, and leveraging symbolic capital. In a sense, a symbolic capitalist, instead of building things with your hands or back or what have you, they manipulate knowledge, they manipulate their symbolic capital, they manipulate, the credentials they've gained. And so you become a symbolic capitalist by gaining this capital, a lot through education. One of the things Musa talks about in his book is how there's this overproduction of elites, of symbolic elites. And they have to find a way in order to gain their material goods in society. And so when you get this overproduction, then you're going to have symbolic capitalists, and you're going to create some of the movements championed by white progressives. Now, I don't like the term woke, but he's using it, so I'll use it in that sense. So you're going to get more wokeness because of this. Musa argues that this emerged through the Occupy Wall Street movement, which came about around 2011, I believe. And through this Occupy Wall Street movement, then you had, once again, this overproduction of elites, and they didn't have an easy place to go in order to gain material goods. So they emerge in these protests, these movements, which then creates places for them. Places to help run the movements, places to become consultants, places to go into academic work, and allows them to gain what they didn't have before, which was a place. I think that, and by the way, one of the things I'm going to say about this book is that it's fantastic looking at the history and looking at different literature. He gathers a lot of literature, a lot of information, and makes arguments very powerfully by looking at what the literature has stated. So, for example, in about 2012, as we find out in this book, there's been this big uptick in discussions on things in the media, in academia, on prejudice, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, whatever. This is sort of symbolic capitalists expressing themselves and creating opportunities for themselves. One thing I like about what Musa does is he does not try to talk about their motivations. In that, he's not saying, well, these people, they don't believe what they're doing. These people, it's all about just the Benjamins for them. They're reacting to their situation. One thing I find in a lot of literature, where I say there's hardly anything on white progressives, and there's not. There's a ton of stuff on white conservatives, white Christians, and a good chunk of it says, well, these people are doing it because they're racist, or these people are doing it because they're homophobic, or these people are doing it because they're xenophobic. And they're doing it, and they're saying this with very little evidence. We social scientists, believe it or not, we can't crawl into people's brains. We can get some assessment, but some of what's been done in looking at white conservatives is just not good science. Musa does not fall into that mistake. He is critical of these white progressives, and he's pointing out that a lot of things they're doing is really not accomplishing the goals that they want to accomplish. He points out that these diversity programs are championed. They're not that useful. He also points out that one of the things that happens with these white elites is that they place themselves in the same box with white middle and lower class. And they talk about privilege, which they have a great deal of. But they look very little at those in the white middle and lower class who may have racial privilege. I'm not saying they don't have any racial privilege, but clearly do not have the economic and the educational privilege of these white elites. And kind of saying we're all in together, we whites are all in together, kind of dismisses their issues. But it serves important needs for these white elites. So this book, I think it really gives us a great overview of this situation and shows on how these white progressives may have good intentions, but what they're actually doing is not helpful to the goals that they have. And they, by and large, don't get criticized from the larger society, at least the larger elite society. They get criticized, obviously, from conservatives, from Christians, but conservatives and Christians are not in academia. So they've gotten a large pass until Musa's book, as far as being criticized. Now, I love this book. I recommend getting it to get an overview on white progressives. Obviously, as an academic, I'm going to have a couple of critiques, and so I'll go ahead and lay them out. My first thing is, I think it's a very fine academic book, but it's not a research book. What I mean by that is, Musa does not produce any additional data or analyze any data. No qualitative data to look at how people think, which I think have been very fascinating. No empirical data to support his points. He uses other studies, he uses historical events, and I think his arguments are sound, but I would have been more convinced if there had been some data, original data in there. And so I would like to see that. I give a preference. I like to have data there, even though his literature review and his analysis, his theory is very solid. I would like to see some data. The second argument I would make, shortcoming, if you will, on Musa's book. And this is something that, may not be fair, because I've written books myself, and there comes a point where you have gotten all the data, all the information you can, and you really can't add anything else. And I realize that this may have come after he's finished the book, but I've been doing work on white progressives. And one of the things that I'm coming across, and I think really helps to define white progressives, and I don't think we're going to fully understand white progressives until we understand this dynamic. This is the tie white progressives have towards anti-Christian animosity. As I've said in the past, I found that this helps predict their racial attitudes, their anti-Christian animosity. I'll post that paper in the description. What does that mean? I think that there are implications there that are completely untouched in this book. Once again, it's fair for Musa to one day see this, come back and say, well, I didn't know about your work, so how can I have included it? perfectly fair. But now that I know about the work, I have to say, I have to factor that in. My last video, I argued that this animosity originated in 2004, which had been before the Occupy Wall Street. So I am skeptical of Musa's argument that Occupy Wall Street was the genesis of this. I think the genesis of this was the emergence of the white progressives that I believe began to formulate around 2004. And that's because of the information about the anti-Christian animosity. If you want more information on that, please go back and look at my last video. And I go more into that link and how it emerged around 2004. But those shortcomings withstanding, this is a fine entry. I think it's the first serious entry as far as a book treatment as for white progressives. We need to have more. It's going to be hard to get more in this current climate in academia, but we need to have more because this is a very important group, very powerful group, control culture in many ways, and we need to understand this group better. Does this share paradigms for you? This gives you some insight into white progressives that I've not really shared before, and Musa definitely brings us some insight that we've not really seen before. Well, I hope you enjoy this little book review. And if you enjoyed this sort of conversation, please consider subscribing to this channel. I want to try to deliver this content on a consistent basis. Feel free to leave a comment, a like, a comment if you don't like it. And I hope that we can create a community where we can discuss these issues. Well, thanks for coming by, and come back. We can shatter some more paradigms.